What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. So in the last C4 video, you could tell that I was getting pretty frustrated. The Endplay in this C4 that I'm putting together was either way too tight or extremely loose. Man, I struggled. I've been riding the struggle bus for a minute. But I have to give a huge shout out to my buddy Jason Black. He let me come over to his house and rummage through his spare parts collection, and I found some selective washers. And even though one of them was right, the other one wasn't, it got me on the right path. So combining that with the parts that I do have that I picked up over at Whatever It Takes transmission over in Charlotte, the selective kit that I got, I think we're going to be able to make this work. So today I'm going to show you how to set up Endplay on a C4 transmission. So what you're looking at here is the front pump assembly of a C4. This is actually called the number 2 thrust, and these are number 1 thrust. Combining with the thickness of the pump gasket, that determines the amount of Endplay that you have in the transmission. But before you get started, you have to set the Endplay with the number 2 thrust before you even attempt trying to get the clearance right here. So what we're going to do is mock this thing up into transmission. This is critical in my opinion, no one else's opinion. I think the Endplay, especially when you're dealing with a rollerized setup such as this, getting this right can go a long ways for longevity. Alright, in order to mock this up, first of all, when you get your soft kit, you get one pump gasket. What I do is I measure the thickness of this gasket and take that in consideration when I'm doing this, because you do not want to keep putting this gasket on, torquing the pump down, taking it off, and ruin this gasket. So I will save this for final assembly, but I am taking, and this gasket measured out at 35 thousandths, so that will play into the equation. I'm not going to put it in with the high gear drum just yet because we're not there. I'm going to put the forward in. I've got the thrust washer there. I'm going to slide it in and engage all of the clutch and friction and steels. Get it seated. You'll notice when I'm mocking it up, I don't even have the seals on the pump, because putting it together, taking it apart with the Teflon seals, you run the risk of damaging the seal. That's not good either. So what I'll do is stick this in here. Take 2 bolts. Snug them up. Okay. Next, I'm going to take the input shaft, slide it in. Make sure that it is seated. Somebody's having fun out there. Bring my dial indicator, get it set up. As you can see, I've got my indicator set up here. We have it zeroed out with a magnetic base on the face of the pump. And what we're going to do is take a screwdriver and pry behind the low reverse planetaries and the sun gear here, and pry it out, and that will tell us how much play is between the two. So when you come back over here, it looks like we're at about 3.5 thousandths or 3 thousandths. Yeah, 3 thousandths. So what I'm going to do is put the pump gasket on it now, and then find out how much the gasket collapses, because it will shrink a couple thou. and then once the pump is torqued down, and then we'll go from there. But since I feel pretty comfortable with this, we're going to go ahead and set the number 1 position. So to set the number 1 thrust washer position, what you do, take the forward clutch and the direct, stack them up like this, and then what we're going to do is, with the number 2 selective in there, slide it in. You will notice a gap between this drum and the pump, okay? The object of this is to find one of these selective washers here that will just slide into that groove, not raise the pump up, but not have a lot of slop in it. Now, according to the factory Ford manual that I showed you in the last video, the 2 washers are supposed to be paired, and I will show you a picture of that according to that book. So what I'm going to do is follow the book's recommendation, put the right thickness fiber in there. Well, it's plastic or nylon. And then back in the old days, they used to be made out of fiber. And we'll check and see what happens. So to give you an example of how this works, let's try to slide this in and see if you can see what I'm talking about. See, it's loose. This is a number 2. Number 3 is still loose. And when you pair it up with number 4, it just slides in. So I'm going to give number 4 a shot and see how it works out. Alright, I'm putting it together, hopefully for keeps this time, since I've got the pump gasket on, copper coated. But one thing that I wanted to bring attention to, when putting this number 2 thrust washer in, there is an oil hole down in that hole right there. Hopefully you can see it. Now, you notice this washer has tabs. You can put that in that way or that way. If you put that tab down in that hole where the oil hole was at, it will block the oil hole and cause major problems. You want to make sure that that oil hole has access to these 2 grooves right here. Put it in there and you'll be good to go. But do not put that tab in that hole. Another thing that I want to point out is I'm checking this Endplay before I even adjust the bands, because I don't want the bands dragging on the drums, and that could throw off the reading some, because it would drag on this instead of actually be able to move freely. Well, it's time to see if I've got lucky or not. I've got the front pump installed, torqued down, band is in place, just like I said, got my indicator. Let's get it zeroed out. You can see it right there. Let's see how much we actually have. Alright, let's try it again. Looks like we're at about between 11.5 and 12. Not bad. Now let's check to see how much clearance this thing has. And this is just roughly checking it by eye, really. You want to have a little bit of play, but you don't want to have an excessive amount of play. It moves just enough. And I've talked about leaks inside the transmission. This high gear direct clutch is the weak link in the C4. So it is my opinion, and just mine only, so if this is set up extremely loose right here, where this can walk back and forth on the stator, you have Teflon seals in there. And those seals are meant to seal radially, not back and forth. So over time, if this drum is walking back and forward, it could potentially wear out the seals and cause more internal leaks and lose line pressure to this drum and get into the high gear flare a lot sooner than you normally would. Once again, that's just Andy's opinion, but you can see that you want to have a little bit of free play in it, but you don't want it to be excessive. And the gear train is perfect here. Man, it feels good to get this thing right. You know, I talked the importance about the Endplay on this transmission. Now, once again, these opinions are just mine. If it was a thrust washer application, the factory specs are from 8 thousandths to 42 thousandths. My opinion on that is, since we're running Torrington bearings on this, you don't want to have a lot of slop in there where the bearing is just flopping around. And I know that the case is going to be preloaded when it's under a load from the engine, but having it run a little bit tighter. Now 12 thousandths, that's where I would like to have it. You know, that is probably the max I would like to have it. So just keep that in mind. It's small details make all the difference in keeping a C4 alive. Okay, the C4 is now complete, minus the valve body. I've got the front pump torqued down, in play. We done checked all that. What I like to do next is air check each system before I put the valve body in. Take your compressed air line. It worked better if I had a rubber nozzle to seal off, but this is the low reverse band. You can see it engages. We'll come over here to the intermediate, and this one will be a little bit harder. It's engaging. Next we'll try the clutch packs. You'll hear like a dull thud. Let me move my hand. That's the clutch actually engaging and releasing. We know that everything is sealed up properly. We know that we've got working circuits. Now I can throw the valve body in it. So now we're in the home stretch of getting this transmission put together, with the exception of the valve body. Now, I've talked a lot about the things to make a C4 live in a high horsepower application. And while there is no one smoking gun, there is a lot of things that contribute to having a C4 live a long, healthy life in a high horsepower application. Now, when I'm talking about high horsepower, it's relative, okay? I'm talking maybe 500 horsepower and up. You know, the rollarization reduces heat friction. You get more power to the rear wheels. The valve body plays a huge part because the timing of the band release and high gear clutch apply is everything. And that goes right in line with the servo. And then having a pump that's capable of delivering the pressure needed, that's not worn out. And then the bushings, all of it ties together. So what we're going to do is talk about this valve body here. When you try to run a manual automatic valve body with a lot of power, it can get you in trouble because the line pressure to the gears are not consistent. What we're going with in Michael's case here is a forward pattern manual shift valve body. That way we maintain constant line pressure in the gears. And yeah, this is just another piece of the puzzle of making it work really good. Actually, Harold scribed Unity, put dynamic racing right there. So what I'm going to do is get this thing in, get the pan bolted on, and finish this thing up. So just know that if you don't feel comfortable building your own transmission, you can always give Dynamic a call and buy a transmission from them that's already been assembled. This video is to kind of help the hands-on person who wants to try to attempt it and run, show you some of the things to really look for that do make a difference. Now while I said in the other video it's not all inclusive, I'm sure I left out a ton of stuff because you know what? I'm not a transmission guy. I'm an engine guy. But I've been in C4s enough over my life to figure out what works, what doesn't, by listening to Harold, talking to him, getting his wisdom of years of building these things, and then some things I figured out on my own. But it's kind of sad for me because sitting here putting this thing together, I realized that this might be the last C4 that I do, as we're looking to go to a Turbo 400 in Casper when the time comes. Because while these are excellent transmissions and they work great in hot rod application and drag race application, I feel like I would be better served in Casper with a Turbo 400 because of the weight and the power. It's not always the power that kills the transmission. It can be the weight, as in the case with Casper. So I'm running a C4 Mighty Mite M2 in the truck, and it's working excellent so far, but I know that if I want to take the truck to the next level, I'm going to have a serious transmission, something that can hold all of the power that I plan on making. So like I said, if you need anything for a C4, give the guys at Dynamic a call. They will hook you up and walk you through it. And if you don't feel comfortable, just buy one of theirs. Excellent transmission. You get what you pay for. So until next time, this is Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage. I'll catch you later. You didn't really think that I was going to let you go without showing you the complete transmission, right? Pans bolted on it. This thing is ready to rock. Remember, Dynamic Racing.